The MiG-29, like I told you, the MiG-21 was a fighter pilot's aeroplane. The MiG-29 is that and more. And more because it gives you, like the MiG-21, a level of confidence when you're sitting in that cockpit that I can outfight anything in the sky. The MiG-29, as your MiG-29 guys will have told you, has certain limitations. The engines burned the gas with this black trail. You could see a MiG-29 from 20, 30 miles away. If we engage the afterburner. If I'm on a cruise in dry power, you will not see me. But if I engage the burners, the moment I engage the burners, there's a black smoke trail, which you can pick up from 20, 30 miles away. So it was a giveaway. It was a giveaway as far as that aircraft is concerned. So as a rule, we would engage it only when required in air-to-air combat because of the visual thing. But of course, the radar was a different ballgame altogether. It was my first experience with the Beyond Visual Range missile system on board, and with the infrared
sensor,
tracking system. So since the aircraft is still flying, I will not talk about it and how we employed it. But needless to say that the systems on board were good for its time. The version of the MiG-29 that I flew was the initial version. What we have today in the Indian Air Force is the upgraded version, which is as good as a Su-30 capability, upgraded to that capability, and with wonderful systems on board, glass cockpits and stuff like that. I never flew a glass cockpit. Fantastic handling capability without fly-by-wire. I mean, when you say you're in the 9G club, well, you're in the 9G club all the time, virtually. In that, it's so easy. It was so responsive. So it was because of sheer maneuverability. If you're doing a close-in combat with somebody, a visual combat, so within visual range bubble combats, I don't think anything would touch it, other than probably the new 5th generation airplanes. There was nothing that could touch it. I had the confidence that it could go through anything. I got to fly 3 chiefs of air staff of other air forces. I flew the Royal Air Force chief, I flew the Singapore Air Force chief, and I flew the Luftwaffe Air Force chief. And do I have the time to tell you about?
Absolutely, go for it, Sumit.
Air Chief Marshal Sir Peter Harding of the Royal Air Force. So I was called into another base where he was visiting, the Mirage base actually. And I was told that you're required here to bring your 2-seater. We'd like to fly the Royal Air Force Chief. He's expressed a desire to fly the MiG-29 because the Mirages he had flown. So I flew in there with my 2-seater, and so I was all set. I met the Air Chief, and tall, strapping gentleman, wonderful person, individual, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and I'm 5 feet 6 inches. So you could imagine. So he sat down for the briefing, and I started to brief him. So he was to fly with me from the rear seat, and I started to brief him. And I told him what happens on takeoff, and I told him we'll do a dry takeoff because I could do an afterburner takeoff with you, not a problem, but you would get left behind so badly, because the aircraft is so fast and so rapid the acceleration is so rapid that you wouldn't really enjoy it to that extent. So I said, we'll do a dry takeoff. And I was told very categorically by my boss there on the base, as well as the Royal Air Force ADC and the staff officer who was with him, to say that the chief has a spondylosis issue and he is not to be put through aerobatics. I said, are you sure? I mean, that's what the MiG-29 is all about, the maneuver. See, they said, no, he has a issue with his spondylosis issue, so you can't put him through all this. He's limited to 3G.
Oh.
So I said, okay. So I briefed him, and as I started the briefing to say that, this is what we'll do, this is it, he put his hand up and he stopped me. He says, son, may I say something? I said, certainly, sir. He says, son, this is going to be the 123rd aeroplane I'm going to fly in my life.
Wow.
I have done the takeoff and the landing on every aeroplane that I fly. May I do the takeoff and the landing? I said, certainly. So I just told him what is to be done. And he was what I've heard and what I had heard and understood was that he'd been an instructor for a very long period of time himself. So on the takeoff roll, he was giving me, what we call patter as an instructor. You talk as whatever the aircraft is doing as it moves along. And that's an ability and a quality and a training that needs to go through. He was giving me patter as good as anybody else on his first ever trip on a MiG-29. I was amazed
That's impressive.
At his professional capability at that age, and hats off. Honestly, I was so impressed. Anyhow, we went up. And I asked him, I said, sir, would you like to, he moved the airplane around here and there. Then I asked him, I said, would you like to do a stall and recovery? He said, you do stall and recovery on a fighter airplane? I said, yes, sir. So he said, okay. So we did the stall and recovery, and he followed me on the controls, and we did the stall and recovery. And we recovered. A MiG-29 loses 50 feet. In a stall and recovery. You can barely feel it. Yeah. She's so forgiving. She's so forgiving. So he said, is that it? I said, yes. He said, I'd like to do one myself. So I said, go ahead. So he did that. Very happy. Then we flew around. I showed him the area. Then I asked him, sir, would you like to do some aerobatics? He said, I have a limitation. I have a medical limitation that I can't exceed 3G. So I'm sorry, I can't do aerobatics. I asked him, I said, sir, would you like to do a loop at 2.5G? Your limitation is 3G. Would you like to do a loop at 2.5G? He said, it can't be done. Well, if you wish, we could do it. Now, he knew this was outside the briefing. And this was with no permissions from anybody. But the chief was willing to take the risk, and he said, show me. So we got down to 3,000 feet, a little lower, and I accelerated and did the loop at 2.5G. He was amazed at the handling ability or the capability of the aeroplane. He says, and I kept talking to him right through to ask him whether he was uncomfortable at any time with the 2.5G. And I showed him, here's the G meter, keep watching it. It's not going to exceed 2.5. And he went through the loop. I kept asking him, are you uncomfortable? He said, yeah, I'm very comfortable. When we finished, he said, this was amazing. He said, can I try it? I said, certainly. So I talked him through it, and he did a loop on his own at 2.5G. He was so happy. When we got back, when he came out of the aeroplane, he was shouting at his ADCs. He had 2 or 3 officers, RAF officers with him. So I've done a loop today. And they had this horrified look, and they were looking at me as to what I had sort of gone against the instructions. But then the chief was so happy that he said, no, I did a loop today. I'm so happy that I've done aerobatics.
Yes.
So that was a great experience.
Absolutely.
And so also with the Singapore HE was very, very, very fit. Very fit.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and they have F-16s, so
yes.
He wanted to fly the MiG-29, and he enjoyed himself. He stayed around between 7 and 9G most of the time.